here's what's been happening with Riot Games. I am sad to tell you that they have had pretty sizable layoffs. 11% of the company. They announced yesterday they were going to be laying off 530 people, to which I tweeted, 530 people are soon to be in need of deprogramming. Because Riot's a cult. So that was my little joke. But on a serious note, I'll say this on stream. I'm going to tweet it out probably tomorrow at a better time. If you're a Rioter and you watch my stuff, because I know you've been spying on me for the Overlords and you want to get extra cultist points so you can get rid of your body thetans or whatever it is you do in Riot Games. Listen. When it comes to people who have suffered any type of abuse or inequalities or any problems at work, any type of bullying, anything inappropriate whatsoever, I'm on your side, even if nominally we spar in public. I am always on the side of people that go through things like that, and I like to use my journalistic platform to help wherever possible. If you want to reach out, if you're affected by these layoffs and you've got some stories you want to share or important issues you'd like to bring to attention anonymously, I've got an impeccable track record on doing this stuff. You can certainly reach out, and I will be on hand to hear your stories. Next, though, let's take a look at the statement. This public available statement is apparently the email they sent to the staffers as they were breaking the news company-wide. Obviously, at this point, the staffers had already been told about the layoffs, and you can see they've got their little cultist fist. And rioters, today, I'm sharing a decision we hoped we would never have to make at Riot. We're changing some of the bets we've made and shifting how we work across the company to create focus and move us toward a more sustainable future. Now, just before I read the rest, let's just also talk about an important piece of context to this story. And that is, I don't think people really will sort of factor this in. But once again, Richard told you this was going to happen. Tencent own the entirety of Riot Games now. It used to be that the NA part of Riot Games was its own little enclave, and they owned enough equity in the company to sort of be autonomous. Tencent were funding them. Tencent were the big company they were partnered with in China, and Tencent did have input on other parts of the Riot Games properties around the world. But for whatever reason, Riot Games, they were faced with some issues, and Tencent upped their stake to, total control, and they kept on a lot of the legacy staff, but they moved people like Mark Merrill into these more, ambassadorial positions. They have this thing within the company, it's kind of hilarious. They have this thing called the D20, and it's obviously named after the 20-sided dice, that you have in popular role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons and stuff. And the D20 is basically all the senior executives that were there at the ground floor when they made the game, or a handful of people who ascended, and they operate in this, internal group in the company where they can just stick their fingers into anything. They're above reproach, that they are unimpeachable in their positions, and their input was in anything they wanted it to be at any time. And that's what the D20 kind of was. And obviously Mark Merrill and Brandon Beck and people like that are in it. Again, if that sounds cult-like, I don't know. But anyway, the D20 is kind of still a thing, but a lot of them got moved into more ambassadorial roles, and they're less hands-on. And, for example, it was Mark Merrill, I believe, that went out to Saudi for that big event in Riyadh, that big esports event, to essentially talk to the people at the esports World Cup and kind of work as a lobbyist almost to getting that deal across the line. And so that's what's going on there. Now, I said at the time when Tencent took over, they were going to make cuts. They were going to cut it to the bone. Because when you think about the Riot Games esports output and how they're always whining about it being a loss leader, that shouldn't be the case. It was the biggest esport in the world at the time. It might very well still be that, even as it's in decline. And they were making other games that maybe weren't going to be particularly popular. Like they came late, as we'll talk about, they came late to the digital card game market and things like that. So ultimately, I foresaw that Tencent would cut people. The other problem that Riot Games had was they were a very bloated company. Why? Because hiring people is control. Let me give you two examples of Riot hires to understand how cult-like and badly run this company was. Here you go. Hire number one. There was a chap that developed a better client than the Riot Games League of Legends client. It was called the Wintermint client, and people loved it. You could download it. It would replace the existing client. It had better functionality. It looked cleaner. It seemed to be more responsive. People really liked it. Riot Games didn't like it. They didn't like the idea that somebody could be better than Riot Games, because as you know, they're all a bunch of fucking delusional narcissists who believe that everything they do is the best. So what did they do? They could have bought the client and used it, but that would be to admit defeat. So instead, they shut the client down, and people were going, I don't like that, Riot. I really like the Wintermint client. But then, to get a little bit of positive PR spin on it, they hired the person who made the Wintermint client on a year-long contract. And you go, well, Richard, surely at that point it's okay to implement that person's ideas? No. They steadfastly refused to implement any of that person's ideas while they were there because he'd had the ideas prior to being a rioter. So in other words, that person sat for a year, they did nothing at all. They were being paid to shut the fuck up. And then they left, and no one ever talked about it again. That's the kind of thing Riot Games does. Here's another example. There was an IGN reviewer, reviewed League of Legends, gave it like a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10, some insanely high review score, which back at the time, the game certainly wasn't worthy of because it had a ton of problems. They hired that person shortly after that review. And made them like a community manager or whatever the fuck it was. So at the end of the day, that's the type of thing Riot Games was doing. So I have to believe that they had a large amount of people that were hired into the company for no other reason except they were fellow cultists, or there was some value in having them there, either to shut them up or to indoctrinate them or whatever it is. That's how Riot Games have always operated. This is why I am despised by everyone even tangentially related to Riot Games. I know these things. I say these things. You will notice Riot have never tried to stop me saying these things because they are all provably true. They're a ridiculous company run by ridiculous people, and any layoffs to Riot Games, the thing that always annoys me is these 530 people will now go back out into the esports ecosystem, and they will talk about how bad it was at Riot Games, but had you challenged them at the time about Riot Games being bad, they would have gone to the wall for the company. They would have gone to the wall for the right to wear that red t-shirt. And that's what you're dealing with, unfortunately. They're like no other games development company I've ever seen. They're actually quite a scary entity. So anyway, back to the statement. This decision means we're eliminating about 530 roles globally, which represents around 11% of our workforce, with the biggest impact to teams outside of core development. This also sadly means we'll be saying goodbye to many talented colleagues and friends across all areas of Riot. I realize this is awful news to hear, and especially hard for those who will be leaving us. To all the rioters who are being laid off, we are deeply sorry that it has come to this. As CEO, I'm accountable for the changes we're making and where we're headed in the future. So I think it's important for me to share how we got here and how the next few days will work. So how we got here, let's see. This is, again, these big bets that they're talking about. More on that in a moment. Since 2019, we've made a number of big bets across the company with the goal of making it better to be a player. We jumped headfirst into creating new experiences and broadening our portfolio, and grew quickly as we became a multi-game, multi-experience company, expanding our global footprint, changing our operating model, bringing in new talent to match our ambitions, and ultimately doubling the size of Riot in just a few years. Now, you will notice the year is 2019. Here's a phenomenon that not a lot of people have really cottoned on to. everyone's looking at these layoffs in tech, in gaming, and they're going like, oh my God, like, this is terrible. Why are these layoffs happening now? It must be the... No. Let me tell you what happened. When the pandemic hit, this is the thing that no one wants to admit, right? But we can say it now. It's safe. You're in a safe place, guys. So here's what certain companies don't ever want to admit. The pandemic was good for them. Very good for them. Very good for business. And there were certain types of company, particularly digital companies, tech companies, video games companies, Amazon, online deliverable companies. All of those companies flourished in the pandemic because we were sat indoors, we were paranoid, we were wearing 10 masks in a fucking car, everybody losing their mind, and social distancing, or in some cases, absolute lockdowns. People stopped commuting to go to work, and then we realized, oh yeah, we could have worked from home the whole time and saved 2 hours a day of our one life that we get. And so people started working at home even after the pandemic and even after the lockdowns. And all the while we're going, oh, I might just order a takeout. I might just order this off Amazon. Yeah, I won't go to the shops today. There's another mutation. There's another strain going on. And we retreated into digital worlds, and these companies that owned these digital worlds, they fucking flourished. And so they hired, and they massively overhired. They went, oh my God, we got all this money. This pandemic's going to last forever. What a boon. Let's fucking go. Let's go. Let's hire. We need to make a new game. Let's get them plugged into this. Let's hire another 500 people. Let's do this. All these companies massively overhired. If you go look at hiring practices during the pandemic for these tech companies, it's mad. It's crazy how much they overhired. And this correction is what's happening now. It's not just an esports correction. The esports winter is real, but we're also having a post-pandemic, employment explosion correction at the same time. These layoffs have to be viewed through that lens if you want to truly understand them and about their impact and everything else. So today, we're a company without a sharp enough focus. And simply put, we have too many things underway. Some of them significant investments we've made aren't paying off the way we expected them to. By the way, this might be the first time on record a rioter has admitted making a mistake. Our costs have grown to the point where they're unsustainable. And we've left ourselves with no room for experimentation or failure, which is vital to a creative company like ours. All of this puts the core of our business at risk. Over the past several months, we've tried to alter our trajectory in many different ways. We asked leaders to make trade-offs in the things their teams are working on. We rolled out hiring slowdowns and in some cases hiring freezes. We put an emphasis on controlling costs while strengthening our revenue growth, all of which has without a doubt been tough for our teams. But as I've dug in with leaders across Riot, it's become clear to all of us that these changes aren't enough. We have to do more to focus our business and center our efforts on the things that drive the most player value, the things that are truly worth the player's time. Unfortunately, this involves making changes in the area where we invest the most, our headcount. I want to be super clear about something. This is absolutely the last thing we ever wanted to do. A decision like this has a massive impact on people's lives and on the culture of Riot. We're not doing this to appease shareholders or to hit some quarterly earnings number. We've made this decision because it's a necessity. It's what we need to do in order to maintain a long-term focus for players. So ultimately, that's a roundabout way of just saying, yeah, we aren't making... I mean, by the way, they're profitable. They must be. But they're not making enough. And this is another thing I expected when Tencent came in. They're very, if you know anything about Tencent, they're a very profit-oriented company. They measure the success of the many, many projects they undertake based on their profitability. They're not interested in making a loss in the short term to make a small gain each year in the future. They don't care about that. They want success. They want it to be fairly quick. If it's not fairly quick, they will fucking get involved and they'll start changing things up. And if it doesn't work, they'll just shut it down and move on to something else. They're one of the wealthiest companies, wealthiest corporations in the world, but they've also got the looming specter of the Chinese government with their golden share being able to just jack their profits at any time they want and redistribute them in any way they see fit. Tencent needs financial success. That's the reality. And so, obviously, Riot Games, it's no different. And this is where we're at. So all of those hires that they made, and probably a few legacy hires that have been around a while and no one really knows what they do, much like the Twitch layoffs prior to this. There were people at Twitch, I talked to them, I said, what's your job? And they would give me a title, and I would go, no, but what's your job? And they go, I don't know. They just occasionally ask me to do things. Can you imagine that? Imagine having a job like that. That's mad, right? Well, there were definitely employees like that at Riot, for sure. So, hopefully they got. Anyway, how this will work, there's no perfect way to do a layoff, but our guiding principle is to do our very best to make sure we're treating Rioters with respect and grace, those two things you always associate with Riot Games. We want those who are leaving us to feel supported in this difficult moment. This starts with limiting the time they spend in ambiguity about the role and future with Riot wherever possible. Within the next hour, rioters around the world will receive an email informing them whether or not their role is or may be impacted. This isn't the usual way we do things, but we wanted to optimize for letting people know as soon as possible, and that's tough to do at our scale without using email. Shortly after, every rioter whose role is or may be impacted will get a calendar invite to meet with their senior leader and people team partner and discuss the next steps within 48 hours. That's a wide range of local employment processes that have to be followed in situations like these. So while these meetings will be completed this week in the US, it may take several weeks to finish them around the world as we follow local law and regulations. Rioters whose roles are going away and who aren't moving into new positions are going to be offered severance pay, a minimum of 6 months' salary, a cash bonus equal to 100% of everyone's individual annual performance bonus. The health benefits in areas where Riot provides healthcare, they will continue to be covered right up until the last day of their employment. We know rioters have maybe got other things they put into this thing called a play fund and wellness fund. And they'll get an additional $1,000 to cover those expenses. Any rioters who received shares or equity in the company get to keep them, subject to terms and conditions. Laptops have to be returned, but rioters can have the option to request a laptop and keep it. There will be career support to offer you job placement services for 6 months after you leave. There will be the Rioter Assistance Program. I don't even know what that is. There will also be visa support if you were employed on a visa. They will talk to the government about your employment benefit, but they will immediately cut off email access. Which, by the way, that all sounds great. Can't really ask for more than that in a layoff. I've, suffered layoffs before from companies where, they've gone under. Again, I had a pandemic layoff. It's pretty good. Can't really argue with it. So anyway, we just come down to this bit. What this means for our portfolio. Let me say we're as committed as ever to League, PC, Valorant, TFT, Wild Rift, and to exploration in research and development. In some cases, we're reshaping our portfolio and teams to develop these games more effectively, but you can expect these to be areas we continue to invest. Our commitment to esports and entertainment in support of our games is also unchanged. The relationships we have with players are a real differentiator for us, so we'll continue building the experiences in and around our games that have a meaningful impact on what it feels like to be a player. While it's the normal course of business for us to spin projects up and down, we also need to make hard choices when our bets, again they keep calling it this, aren't performing as well as we hoped. We're making adjustments to some of our R&D efforts across games, esports and entertainment. We're also rethinking the level of support we demand from our enterprise teams. We've made 2 decisions about our current games portfolio that we want to share with you now. We plan to announce these to players shortly. Legends of Runeterra continues its journey. We're making changes to move the game towards sustainability. We know that's, by the way, if you don't know, Legends of Runeterra was their sort of Hearthstone equivalent. We know there's a passionate community who absolutely love this game, and we do too. However, it hasn't performed as well as we need it to, despite our best efforts. We've been subsidizing the cost of development on LOR through our other games, but at this point, that's just not a viable option, so we're reducing the size of the team and shifting our focus to the Path of Champions PvE game mode. In addition, we're sunsetting Riot Forge after the upcoming release of Bandle Tale. Forge has been our collaboration with external studios to develop smaller scale games in our IP. If you don't know, by the way, that those games, I believe, were responsible for Wrath of Mark Merrill or something like that. Yeah, New News. New News Adventure was another one as well. Anyway, we aren't closing the door entirely on single-player experiences or working with other developers if the right project comes along, but we would want to do it different in future. And then the path forward, there's no way around the fact it's an extremely sad moment. For those who are leaving, I want to reiterate, we are deeply sorry for the impact this has on you and your family. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for Riot and your dedication to our players. We're committed to doing our best to support you in this moment and through this transition. For those who are staying, I know this is a difficult time for you too. You're not only losing co-workers and friends, but you may also feel uncertain about the road ahead. I want to assure you that our vision for the future remains ambitious. We will not lose our desire to dream for players, and as hard as this moment may be, we will emerge from it in a stronger place. I'm confident that by creating focus together, thinking long term, and operating as one Riot, very much like one China, we'll be able to truly make it better to be a player. While we'd love for this news to remain within our virtual walls, we know that's not realistic. There are many members of our global community who care deeply about the people who make and support their favourite games. With that in mind, I'm going to share this email publicly on riotgames.com in the hopes that it answers most of the questions so you don't have to, and we will be holding a town hall later. So, one thing I wanted to just briefly talk about here. The constant use of the word bets. I hate the way that they're using that term because they're not bets. Their decisions. And what they've done there by couching the language in this idea that these things were gambles, they are insulating themselves from any critique around the decisions, right? So I'll say this. These were not bets. You came late, right? There was this thing where they were memed on for ages about being a one-game company. They called themselves Riot Games. Where are all the other games? And, of course, in the data breach that I covered in an article called The Hacker That Went to War with Riot Games, which you can look up, it's on .esports, it's from 2014, I believe. It was revealed in the data breach that they had been working on a card game, I believe, prior to Hearthstone. It got scrapped. Some of the assets got leaked. And ultimately, they hit this point where they decided to just do a bunch of games all at once. They ended up getting into bed with the people over at fucking, Evo, and they're going to make a fighting game. Based on the League of Legends lore. They did a card game. They did a Hearthstone-style card game, the Legends of Runeterra. When auto-battlers were having their little fad, how's that worked out today? Because that is a genre that is fucking brain-dead, in my opinion. I knew that wasn't going to last. They turned around and they quickly, look, Dota's having some more success. We've never stolen from Dota before, and they made a fucking auto-battler. And then they said they're going to, make a fucking MMO, which, Mark Merrill publicly said, and then, why don't I fuck around and make an MMO? And then, obviously, nothing's happened with that, and I don't know if it's even going ahead. It certainly wouldn't make sense within light of the layoffs. They did board games as well. So they have put all of this effort into making all of these games all at once. And, of course, I'm leaving out Valorant because that has been successful. I don't think we can disagree with that. And they really didn't necessarily pop off in the way they wanted to, all of them. I mean, TFT is doing well by auto-battler standards, I am told, mostly by Doa. But, and Bryce Blum as well. He's done some commentary, we talk. But, the bottom line is a lot of these games weren't, they were late to the party. The digital card game market at that point was so saturated, it was always going to be a big ask, because if you're invested in Magic, if you're invested in Hearthstone, if you're invested in that Warhammer one, or whatever it is, you've already spent fucking tons of money on a card game, which they all functionally do the same thing. The only thing that really is interesting in the card games are occasionally mechanics, but more often than not, the lore and how you feel an attachment to it. All of these deck builders are like that. And yep, you Geo. I see you, Oxytech. So, look, how you come late to that party and expect to be a success just predicated on the idea that people like League of Legends, that's not a bet. That is a bad decision. That is a decision that if you looked at the industry, you realize that that wasn't the time. But they're calling it a bet. So, anyway, I hated that. I hated the way. I hate that they're calling it a bet instead of a bad decision. You want to contrast that. Look at what Valve had to say about Artifact. They're very just flippant about, that fucked up, didn't it? I do want to point out as well, it wouldn't really be a Riot Games story if there weren't lies involved, because of course. I do want to remind everybody what they said in January. Now, Jacob Wolf, I'm sure you've heard of him, he announced on Twitter, x.com now, Riot Games are making layoffs, which started earlier today. Multiple people have told me. Size and scope is unclear at the moment. So far, I've heard of effects across recruiting and human resources supporting esports. We'll do more reporting in the morning for the newsletter, and that was on January the 19th, right? So right at the start of 2023. And Jacob put out the story. He is indeed the progenitor of the story. And because Riot Games are childish and snippy, they don't go to him and give him a statement or any of that. They don't go, oh, hey, Jacob, saw your story, give us a call. Like some, there are companies that do this. I've worked with them myself. They instead went to other media outlets to give statements. And we can see one here. This is Rock, Paper, Shotgun. Here's the statement from them. So, Riot Games have confirmed they've laid off 46 staff. And their statement says, Riot Games implemented strategic shifts within a few teams to sharpen our focus in a number of areas. With these shifts, certain roles were eliminated, impacting a total of 46 rioters. This is part of our normal course of our business. We periodically make changes to our structure and our teams based on what we believe will allow us to deliver the best content and experience for players. We never make these decisions lightly. We will always start from a place of wanting to retain rioters and have them focus on our highest priorities. While that's not always possible, it's our primary goal. And so, in case you missed it, within that statement, they're like, oh yeah, it's just a normal course of business. We made 46 layoffs. We eliminated some roles. It's about streamlining things to make it better for players. Nothing to see here. And of course, you fast forward a year, literally almost a year to the day, and we're doing 530 now. And is that the normal course of business? No. This is actually an exceptional reduction in staff that they themselves in their own statement have admitted is going to impede working on certain projects, and they are going to shelve certain projects as a result of that. Laying off 11% of the company is pretty intense. I mean, that's like a big layoff. Anyway, the next part they did as part of this is they reached out to the players. They wanted to reassure the players that everything's going to be okay because they're Riot Games. And so they did that, and here it is. They went and said, oh, yeah, dear players, minutes ago we showed the rioters were refocusing on fewer high-impact projects to move us toward a more sustainable future. Now we want to tell you what these changes mean for our games and everything around them, like esports, Arcane. That's obviously their animated show, which, by the way, spoiler, animation's sick. Actually not bad. Not a bad TV series. I watched it out of curiosity. I vomited every episode when it said executive producer Mark Merrill at the start. Right? Esports Lifetime Achievement Award recipient Mark Merrill. But you know what? It was actually good. It was, well, not good. I don't want to oversell it. My expectations were low, but it exceeded them. So You know, I'll take that. Anyway, for most of our history, we've managed to avoid days like this, but this decision is critical for the future of Riot. It's not to appease shareholders, they keep saying that, or to hit a quarterly earnings number. It's a necessity. Over the past few years, as Riot more than doubled in headcount, we spread our efforts across more and more projects without sharp enough razors to decide what players needed most. He says, our vision for the future is bold. Okay, very... Hit me with your boldness. And our commitment to our core live games, which is League of Legends, Valorant, Teamfight Tactics, and Wild Rift, is more ambitious than ever. We're prioritizing these teams so they can focus on the content, features, and updates that directly respond to what you've been asking for. Expect events, modes, and long-term roadmaps that lead to vibrant, hopefully multi-decade futures for these games. Our strategy will more tightly integrate esports, music, and entertainment with our games. I'm not really acknowledging the music side of things, but they did that. They always had that fucking band Pentakill, and that's cringe. And then they also did that thing with the animated characters that are in a band, and that's fucking cringe. Is it KDA? I don't know. And they did that thing as well where, like, wasn't one of the characters like neurodivergent and like had a Twitter account and was like tweeting weird things? I don't fucking know. I can't be asked. It's creepy and shit. It's, you know, so not for me. It's like this wanky thing. They think of themselves as like an entertainment company. We're a multimedia entertainment entity. We don't just make games. Okay, bro. Cool. Anyway, entertainment isn't just about storytelling. It's a gateway. By the way, this paragraph, I want you to imagine it's Garth Marenghi. Visionary, dreamweaver, right? Just get into it. Entertainment. I wish I could do Garth Marenghi's voice. Entertainment, I can't. Entertainment isn't just about storytelling. It's a gateway to the deeper narratives, characters, and worlds that enrich the game experience. As we've grown, some of our efforts have become more isolated, and we aspire to more seamlessly blend gameplay, competitive excellence, and narrative depth in ways that truly make it better to be a player. By the way, they care so much about fucking narrative depth. They've just cut analysis segments in their esports broadcast where the narratives are talked about and analysed to see if they indeed did come to fruition. Love them narratives, me. Whether it's the next hit from KDA, the story unfolding in Arcane, the intensity of a TFT Open, I mean, super intense, the one-of-a-kind chills of a Worlds Game 5, or the electric atmosphere of Val Champs, our focus is on quality, impact, and unified experiences for players around the world. Beyond live titles, we have projects in the pipeline that we can't wait to get to you when they're ready. Project L has been making great progress, and we're looking for more opportunities for you to try out the game. That's their fighting game, appropriately called Project fucking L. It could have only been more on the nose if it was called Project Poor Hygiene. For fuck's sake. Oh, they're making a fighting game. I can't wait. Can't wait for rioters and the FGC to fully interface for the insanity the insanity special. Anyway, Arcane Season 2 is on track for November 2024. Plus, we have a number of projects cooking, let them cook, in various stages of R&D. Our volume of releases will never be massive. We want everything we deliver to be something you can be proud of and excited to share with friends, and that requires having financial flexibility to be able to take the time to make things that are truly great for players. We know we'll still have occasional misses. We want those misses to be for the right reasons, not because we prioritized the wrong things or had to rush projects out the door before they were ready. And so here, they just confirm what you saw, that yes, there's financial challenges with the Legends of Runeterra, so they're going to move it more to PvE instead of the more PvP deck building thing, which, by the way, all the card games that I've really enjoyed in the last few years, just speaking as like putting my games review ahead on for a little bit, they've all been PvE games. I mean, Slay the Spire really set off a chain of, I don't want to call them copycats, that's a bit reductive, but it rejuvenated a genre that people sort of hadn't really thought about for a long time. And, you know, you look at games like fucking, you know, Monster Train and all of that stuff. Inscription, a PvE card game / escape room. There was some really innovative and interesting PvE card games, which, I've super enjoyed. And so, I don't think it's a bad direction, by the way. I think, it will require less effort to do that. And it's also not as financially contingent. You're not being propped up by whales. Players aren't going to get disheartened, things like that. So that's a good move for them. And obviously ending their involvement with Riot Forge. Those single player games, I think it's a shame, really, because if you do like the League of Legends lore, they did tell some okay-ish stories in some of these games, and there's value there. So it's a shame they're not going to be happening, but, it is what it is. Anyway, the journey ahead with you, the player. Our strategy moving forward is clear. We're honing in on what we do best and what resonates most with you. Every endeavor, from development to storytelling to competition, will be crafted to deliver meaningful, memorable experiences with games at the center. While change can bring uncertainty, it also presents opportunities for growth and innovation, and we're grateful for your ongoing support. Nothing Riot has ever created would be possible without you. Your passion and engagement inspire us every day, and we're excited to continue this journey together. Fawn, panda. So that's where Riot Games are at. They're doing these layoffs. And I have to say as well, it's interesting. If the layoffs are being driven by the fact that some of their projects haven't been as successful as they'd hoped and haven't been as financially viable, as profitable as they'd hoped, then you really have to look at Project L's got a big ask ahead of itself, and they are obviously going to leverage their relationship with Evo to get disproportionate promotion. But I look at fighting games and how they've had a renaissance, and the new Street Fighter that had a PvE mode, and people seem to really like the game and the mechanics. Tekken 8 is out. I got the welcome email from Tekken. I've been signed up to the Tekken fucking press thing for so long. I got that. And it feels, again, much like with the card games, and, they got sort of... if the auto battler was a separate game and not in the League of Legends client, you sort of have to wonder. I do wonder about Project L and whether or not it's going to actually be a success. Fighting games are really oversaturated, and quality matters, and also not just quality, but legacy. People that don't even necessarily play fighting games will pick up a Street Fighter title because they remember it. They played all of the Street Fighters, so I'm definitely playing this one. It's the same with Tekken. You want to see what Wacky Scrapes' King got into this time. What's happened to Brian this time? You want to know how they're updating and evolving these characters. What's fucking Heihachi look like this time? And so, things like Mortal Kombat have definitely fallen a little bit by the wayside. The last Mortal Kombat was very fucking bland and generic. They did a reboot. But, I don't know. I'd be a bit worried about that, because if they're firing people and downsizing groups, it could well be in another year if Project L, God knows what they're going to call it, Riot Fighters or something maybe, or, League of Punches. I don't really know. But if it fails, and it's got every chance of failing, what happens then? This is like a pretty big time investment. They've been working on it for a while. I think Project L was announced at the same time as Valorant, so you're talking years now. And they bought up a lot of infrastructure and hired a lot of people from Endemic, from the FGC. So you sort of have to fucking wonder, Anyway, we will see. But ultimately, there you go. Riot Games. They're laying off rioters. Left, right, and center. They are saying it's necessary for the future of the company. And one final point, because I did talk about this with Monty quickly when it happened. And he said, have you noticed how none of the layoffs are related to esports? And I said, well, I mean, why would they be necessarily? And he went, well, think about it. We're having an esports winter, but Riot Games haven't made any layoffs related to esports in that 530 people. And I went, yeah. And he said, That's because, despite what Riot Games have always maintained about esports being a loss leader, it's actually the esports side of things that has been profitable. It must be. And I was like, huh. And so I don't necessarily agree, but it'll be interesting to get into that. Once we have a clearer idea about who is in the 530 and if there's any big names in there and people who've been attached to esports projects, it'll be interesting to see. But if it is just like sort of the more rank and file games developers and people who work on teams overseen by the games development groups in the company, then yeah, they might have some splaining to do on the esports front. But anyway, layoffs at Riot, good.